to the last day of 3-day online workshop for JZ A-Level English 73. We have the two senior university lecturers with us today from University of California, Mrs. Dinali Fernando and Dr. Shashikala Asala for the session on unseen poetry and prose, followed by question and answer session. Let me tell you how you all get this session. Of course, when I spoke to Madam Dinali to have a session for A-Level English, she came out with this wonderful session plan for 3 days with 3 resource people as well. So that is how you got this opportunity. Dear Madam, I must convey my gratitude to you for making such a wonderful plan for the benefit of all the students, and teachers also joined sometime, and for them during this pandemic survey and pandemic, and it is a meritorious service indeed. So I must express my thanks to our Deputy Director of English, Mr. Isru Jayasundara, who provided the platform for all 3 days. So it is a collective effort really, and Mr. Isru Jayasundara, the Deputy Director of Education, Chiaw Zone, conveys his kind regards and sincere thanks to Dr. Shashi, Madam Dinali, and Mrs. Vaidehi as well, who was the resource person yesterday. Let us come back to our session introduction, and let me introduce our speakers. It is my bounded duty, I think. Mrs. Dinali Fernando has an honors degree in English, University of California, and MA in University of Reading, UK. Dr. Shashikala Asala has a special degree in English, University of Sabaragamu, MA in English Literature, Jawaharlal Nehru University, India, and she holds a PhD in University of Nottingham. So they excel in the field of English, providing a comprehensive service to the whole unit, like the service is immeasurable really, and they are kind-hearted, ever ready to cooperate all the teachers in English in the country as well. Dear Madam Dinali and Madam Shashikala Asala, I cordially invite you both to conduct the session on unseen poetry and prose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rasika. Thank you very much for that kind introduction and for your kind endorsement of my efforts. It's always a pleasure to help, especially our trainers in the rest, because I think they have a very, they serve the English education efforts in the country in a very quiet way, but in a very effective way, I think. So I think we have about 250 students. It's a good time to tell you about the rest also, because they are rest trainers like Miss Rasika and Miss Mithila from Kurunagala Rest, who's here. They do a lot of quiet but very solid work. They look after teacher training, and now actually they are looking after you as well. They are concerned about, particularly about supporting students in areas where they need a lot of support, like English literature. So without further ado, I will start I think my camera is not behaving itself. It's not coming on, but that's okay. I will start by screen sharing. So what we will do today is we will be doing unseen poetry, unseen prose and poetry and prose. Can you all see my screen now? Can you all see my, Rasika, can you see my screen?
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay, oh, sorry. Share screen. Is that better?
Yeah, came on.
Is that all right? Are we sharing now?
Sure,
Am I
sure,
sharing now?
ma'am. Sure, ma'am.
Right,
We
thank
get
you.
it now.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm
No
being a
worries.
bit clumsy with my technology. Right. So this is, as I just said, we'll be looking at the two questions on unseen poetry and prose in paper 2 again. And before we start, I'd like to remind you that a lot of what we have been saying about how to answer a essay question and what Dr. Shashi said about how to answer long questions in paper 1, the literature questions, and this bear a lot of parallels. Okay, the fundamentals of answering unseen poetry and prose questions also overlap with the other questions, and we will see what those are. Right, so this is a quick overview of the session. So I will introduce quickly what an unseen and prose and poetry question are in terms of what you have to do at the exam, and then we'll again, like last, according to okay, well, let me, since the recording just started, I will introduce unseen and poetry questions as we have done earlier and how it will appear in the exam. And then we'll look at features of an A grade unseen answer. A student who will get who wants to get an A grade, what you need to do. And this is based fairly closely on the marking scheme of the last couple of years. And then we'll look at some do's and don'ts, some things you should do and things you should avoid doing when you answer these questions. Then we'll do some activities today. So rather than having a very long section of question and answers from you, which we will also have later, today you will be doing a bit of work, okay? Because these are short answers, and I have already shared the document that I wanted to read. Don't worry if you haven't been able to download it yet. I will download it again. Sorry, I will upload it again on your chat box. And those of you who have got it, if you can just WhatsApp it to your friends if they're having trouble, because it's a big group. There's now 280 of you and the numbers are growing. So do share this document with you. It's a one-page PDF document with a prose passage and a few questions. It's all in one page, okay? So Dr. Shashi, at the fourth point, Dr. Shashi will take over and she will share a poem with questions, and she will get you to do some, get your views on it and discuss it. I will do the same after that. And then at the end of it, we will go in again for questions and comments. And this will wind up our workshop, okay? So let me start. So the unseens in paper 2 actually carry 20 marks each, so 40 marks in all. So it's quite a significant part of your overall mark, no? More than 1/3. And both questions are compulsory. In a way, they test similar skills, but through very rather different genres of writing, poetry and creative writing, okay? In one sense, it says test similar skills because it is about reading comprehension, but it actually does not test basic reading comprehension. It tests slightly higher level reading skills, okay? So you also need to get an understanding. It tests your comprehension of the surface level meaning of the text, what these words mean, okay, what meaning is created just by the very words, but also the underlying significance of what is being said, okay? And we colloquially call these hidden meanings, and students, when they read poetry, they say, I can't understand the hidden meaning in this poem, okay? Don't use that term much because it's not always hidden, okay? Underlying significance is not always that hidden. It can be conveyed through word choices, through descriptions, through imagery and other literary devices, particularly in poetry. In poetry, you might get a lot of literary devices in a very short extract, no? Like you saw with Ms. Vaidehi's session, okay? But in prose, you might get more characterization. You know, there might be more descriptions of characters through their words, particularly, and their actions. And also there might be more events or more description of events, okay? So the underlying significance is conveyed through a combination of many of these elements, okay? So combination of not necessarily all of them all the time, but definitely some of these all the time, right? And remember, in the unseen questions, you are not deducted any marks for language errors. And I would like to, if there are teachers who are following this session, I would also like to remind you here, don't be too strict about, spelling errors and simple grammatical slips. But at the same time, if your language is really weak, we know it will have an impact on how you communicate your ideas, right? So when we talk about language errors, it's surface level language errors. Okay, like punctuation, like subject-verb agreement, which you will be deducted marks for in the essay, but here you will not be deducted marks. Okay, but at the same time, you need to be able to write, and we will see how you write for an unseen passage in the next slides. So you need to be able to be fluent enough and proficient enough to convey what you want to say in your answers. And here also, like in your Prezi and in your essay, you need to use your language as far as possible, your own words as far as possible, because that's what conveys your understanding, right? Also, some of them ask you for what happens in the story. Okay. There, it's not an analysis, it's a comprehension of, your basic comprehension, but some ask for your opinion, some ask you to talk about the significance of a certain section where analysis is requested, okay, where you are supposed to give your own analysis. So this is where you have to do some critical reading, okay, critical analytical reading. Any analysis is acceptable in the unseen as long as it is supported with evidence from the passage, okay? So you will hear us saying this like a broken record. You can say anything as long as it's supported. You can say anything as long as you give the evidence. You can say anything as long as you can give an example directly from the text, okay? Here, you can quote, use words that have specific meaning, or you can also paraphrase events, etc. You can describe, etc. So we'll go on, right? So these are the types of questions that you get from unseen papers, for the unseen passages and the poem. So the first one on your left is from the 2019 paper, from questions of prose. 2017 paper, the poem, the questions based on the poem, right? So it talks about what role does the tiger, if you have done the paper, is a name for a forest. No, it's supposed to be the thickest kind of forest in the world. Okay, so what role does the tiger play in this short story? What is the main literary device used to bring out the tiger's fearsome qualities? So remember, literary devices will occur even in the prose. Okay. How is the passage of time conveyed in this story? Refer to the language as well as imagery in your explanation. So it tells you what to do. Talk about the language and the images used, right? Remember, just a bit of language advice, there is no word as imageries, okay? Imagery is a singular noun, okay? It's a collective noun, you could say. It's not imageries. You can get a lot of images, but the collective is imagery, right? What does the phrase, so number 4 is, what is the phrase? But that is only a fable conveyed to you. Who says these words, okay? So who says these words is a basic comprehension question, but what does it convey to you shows where you need to analyze it and also bring out your own views, okay? So there is some space in some of these questions to talk about how you respond, for your personal response, right? And then at the end of the story, are bears human or the human bears? What would be the difference? So there are 2 parts to this question, right? And you get the similar kind of questions for poetry as well, right? What kind of marriage is described in the poem? Okay, very much your own opinion and based on the evidence that you can give, right? Marriage lasted 30 years. What reasons are given in the poem for marriages to have lasted that long? That is a comprehension question. Okay, that is a simple comprehension question because you are looking for the evidence directly from the poem. No? It might be worded in a more poetic way. It might be suggested sometimes. I'm not using the poem here, right? How is social class of the couple depicted in the poem? Okay, that also you have to find evidence. Now, something interesting you can see is in the questions on the poem on the right hand side, all the questions carry 4 marks. But more and more, there is a varying amount of marks given for each question. So remember, 5 marks means you have to go a little bit in depth, okay? Maybe a little bit longer, whereas 3 marks should indicate to you that it doesn't need a long or a more as comprehensive an answer as you would do for 5 marks, okay? 4 marks would be something in between what you write for the 4th question and the 5th question. So look at the marks also when you're writing, just to see, like, if it's just 2 marks, you might have lots of things to say, but don't continue to spend a lot of time on it, because remember, however wonderful it is, it's only 2 marks. And 2 marks also would indicate to you that you don't need to write at length, right? It can be a very short answer of a couple of lines, right? So we now look at features of an A grade answer. And after I do this, I will go and look at the questions again. I can see 7 have popped up. A A grade answer or an A grade student will have focused answers, okay, that show your critical and analytical skills. We'll look at what focused means later. So it will not only show your basic comprehension skills, but it will show your analytical skills, okay? Then it shows full understanding of the question and addresses every part of the question. You would have noticed in the previous slide, some of those questions have 2 parts, like these 2 here. Okay, like the second question is from the previous slide. At the end of the story, are the bears human or the humans bears? So that can be yes, no, maybe. That does not have to be a 1-word line. You might want to elaborate with a couple of lines. What would be the difference will be the bulk of your answer. That is where you flesh it out. Then from a previous paper, I think this is from 2018. It's about 2 brothers from Russia called Petya and Mikhail. What are Petya and Mikhail? Where are Petya and Mikhail? I'm sorry. And what is each brother getting ready to do? Okay. So when you answer these questions, make sure you address both parts of the question. In the rush, sometimes students forget to do that. And then what the examiners are supposed to do is only give you out of 2 because the other part has not been answered. Okay. So take a bit of time and read the questions carefully, just as you read the passage carefully. Okay. And every point you make, the answer key says that you should include 2 or more relevant points for the open-ended questions. Most of them are open-ended, where you can give, it's like, well, it's when there's not one single right answer, okay, because this is where you're showing your critical skills, right? And also, once again, provides evidence or supporting details for every point you make, okay? So directly refer to the passage, use quotations, use words from the passage or the poem, okay? Paraphrase, summarize. You can do all those. You can use all those techniques to show that you are taking evidence directly from the poem, okay? Summarizing, paraphrasing, directly quoting lines, using even single words or phrases, okay? Sometimes you don't have to write the whole line, right? Especially for this kind of question, the unscenes, you can convey your ability to quote directly or provide evidence just by using a couple of phrases that the poet or the prose writer has used, okay? Then, what do we mean by writing focused, okay? So this is very focused. You write to the point. Okay, you address the question from the very first sentence that you write in your answer. You don't have to give an introduction to the passage. Okay, this passage is about blah blah blah. When the question asks, where are Petya and Mikhail? Okay, this passage is about two Russian boys, etc. And that's irrelevant, right? So don't give long background descriptions. Don't give introductions to the passage or the question or the poem. Sorry, not question, but poem. Don't be vague. Don't write anything that is not directly relevant to what is being asked. Okay, vagueness is when you say things which is not very clear or very definite. Okay, sometimes we indulge in vagueness when we are not sure. Okay, if you're not sure, leave that question, go to another question, come back, and you might see it with more clarity. Okay, right, now let me look at your questions. Madam, should we separate the answer into two paragraphs in answering a question with two parts? Yes, you don't have to answer it in one paragraph. Okay, especially the questions with 5 or more marks. You don't have to answer in one big block of a paragraph. You can break it down into 2 or 3 paragraphs. Okay, there is no strict rule. It's about how you see the question and what you have to say. If you want to make 2 very different points, it's good to break it up into paragraphs and say it in 2 different paragraphs to make it clear. Otherwise, you can use a transition. You can say, yes, this is so. However, this is also not so. Okay. Now, don't worry about the PDF. I will send it again, right? What do you mean by open-ended questions? Open-ended questions is the opposite of a closed-ended, closed question. A closed question is when you have only one single mark. Oh, sorry, one single answer. It's yes or no. It's black or white. Where are Petra and Mikhail? They are in the forest. Okay, something like that. And there is only one answer. Open-ended questions, but there can be multiple answers based on your point of view. What are your opinions about the online education? Would be a very open-ended answer. Okay, there is no specific length, Tarushi, but generally it is not, since you have 5 questions to answer, each one is not an essay. And don't think of answers as mini essays with an introduction, body, and a conclusion. Think of these as short answers. Okay, short to the point answers. Right. So there is no set length. Can we use? Yes, I think I answered that. Can we use quotations from the prose poem or prose or poem to give evidence to the answer, not prove? You don't prove anything in literature. You provide evidence, right? Yes, you can use quotations. I covered that already, my dear. Right. You're welcome. Okay. Now let us move on. Some do's and don'ts. Okay, so keep these in mind, right? Once again, right to the point. So that's what I mean by answering the question head on, directly, without introductions or background descriptions. Okay. Once again, you can use paragraphs, but no need of introductions and conclusions. Once again, this is not an essay type answer. This is a short answer. Okay. Don't write lengthy answers. I'm sorry about my spelling of right. Let me correct that. Now it's don't write lengthy answers. Don't expand or elaborate on the question or your answers too much. What I mean by expanding and elaborating the question is when you talk about the question first. This question asks this, perhaps this answer, the question talks about this, perhaps the question talks about it. You explain the question first. Don't do that, okay? Not many students do that, but sometimes very good students tend to do that. So please avoid it, okay? You don't need to elaborate too much. Just give the point and the evidence, right? And the mark allocations, as I told you, indicates the weightage, how much marks are given to each question. So go by that, okay? So a question carrying 2 marks does not need as much of a comprehensive answer as a question that carries 5 or 6 marks, okay? So all this is to do with practice. You need to practice reading these passages, unseen passages, and answering questions on this, and getting feedback from your teachers, right? So one tip I can give you, I think you must be already knowing this, but particularly the students doing the A-levels this year, the best thing to do in any kind of comprehension question, whether it's Sinhala or Tamil first language paper, if you're doing your first language also as a subject, is to read the questions first, because they will provide you with an introduction to the passage. So when you read the questions, you know, this is going to be there. This is about this. Might be there, okay? And then the passage becomes slightly familiar to you, and your reading will be from the beginning more done with more awareness than, you know, seeking to see what the story is basically about, okay? Reading the questions first will also guide your reading and analysis, okay? So when you read the first question, the questions, they will, when you, and go back to the passage, in a way, it's like a detective work. You are looking for answers to the questions in your very first reading, right? At the same time, don't make it too narrow. Don't do it too much like a detective with a very, very good magnifying glass, because you might miss the wood for the trees, you might miss the other details, but this is just to guide your reading and to guide your analysis. It's not to totally focus only on your analysis, right? Right, I will just quickly look at some of the questions. Yeah, yes, should we write an answer write an answer at least half a page? It depends, okay? As I told you, it depends on how much weightage of marks is given and what you need to say. If it asks you a very open question about what are the different ways in which this idea is conveyed, you might even need more than half a page, okay? Because that is a very, it's a question that asks a lot of things for you, asks you to do a lot of things, no? So, but sometimes you can answer very, very briefly, right? Shashi, are you there?
Yes, I'm listening. Yeah. I just wanted to pitch in and say.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
To reiterate what you said, like there is no set length at all. So if you are being asked a very simple question like, what is happening in this poem, or like what is the place this incident is taking place, or whatever, you just write 2 lines and you still get the 3 marks as long as you provide evidence to support that. So don't go by like this belief that you have to write at least 10 lines to get the 3 marks. That doesn't work that way.
Yes, I think I'm getting a bit worried about all these quantity-based questions.
Yes.
You guys are asking, to be very honest. And I hope the teachers are not making you feel like this. It's not about how much you write, how little you write, how many sentences you write, how many words there are to a sentence, should you write, whether it's half a page, quarter page, 3/4 page. It's about what you say, you know. And we've gone through this about, you know, it's very difficult to say about length, because it depends on your handwriting, it depends on your spacing, it depends on how much you flesh your answer, okay? So don't think, and also teachers who are there, please don't tell your students this, you know, don't tell your students you should write half a page for this answer and deduct marks. Tell them what they have written, whether it's right or wrong, in what places they should elaborate, in what places they shouldn't elaborate so much, okay? So don't think of doing literature in terms of quantities. We can't, especially in what we write, okay? Especially essays depends on anything, even essays. It depends, and we can't say, okay, all the A grade students have this length of answers. It's an absurd thing to talk about, you know.
And I think like some of the A grade students write very, very succinctly, and then you actually have very good answers with like a decent length, not very long.
Yeah, so sorry about the rant, but you know, these questions are getting repeated over and over again, and it's a bit concerning. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are some do's and don'ts. So I have repeated them. So I hope you have noted them down in your head at least when we do. So what we're going to do is when you go to do the activities, try to practice what we have just talked about. Okay. Right. So now I would like to hand over to Dr. Shashi, who will be sharing a poem and an unseen poem with you and the questions. And I think, well, she will handle it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dinali. Just to again stress on the point that was there in the previous slide, start from the questions, because that makes life much, much easier, because you are sometimes fighting against time, you're anxious, you're trying to do your best because you are sitting at an exam. So sometimes you will miss crucial clues when you're reading stuff, especially the unseen prose and poem, because you are in a rush, because you are anxious, because you are worried. So start with the questions, because the questions put things into perspective for you. And the questions usually guide you through the poem or the prose. So please start with the questions. I'm going to do the unseen poem. Yeah, so I'm going to discontinue Dinali's screen sharing, and I'm going to start my screen share.
I'll stop sharing, Shashi.
No, that's fine. I just did that. So what I'm going to share now is this question that came in 2019 paper. Of course, the title was not given. The title is Blind, and it was written by Leon Gellert. It was also not given because it is an unseen poem, but this was the poem. I'm just going to read it very quickly, so that if people are not looking at their devices, or if the device is small, you have a sense of what I'm talking about. This is how the poem goes. A red-roofed house is shining to the skies, a red-roofed and brilliant in the wind. A house of color filled with wondering eyes, and all the eyes are blind. A gentle sound of moving fills each room, a sound of hands, dumb hands that touch and pry. A sound of fingers feeling in a tomb before they close and die. 100 windows face long rows of flowers, and flowers that sway and dance, where lidded eyes can gaze for hours and hours, blue eyes that shut in trance. Now that's a very simple poem when you are relaxed. This becomes a very difficult poem when you are under pressure to finish, especially the unseen prose and poem, because they come because they are the last two questions in that paper. People are fighting against time. So what I want you all to do is, I'm sure some of you have done this with your teachers. Now this is the moment to use your chat box. Look at the poem and answer the first two questions if you can, please. The questions are at the bottom. What kind of place does this poem describe? That's a 3-mark question. Question 2, identify the imagery used to present blindness in this poem. Is it successful? Sorry, I'll just make the questions bigger. I'll give you like 2-3 minutes, because I'm convinced that you have read this poem before. So what kind of place does this poem describe? Dinali, I can't see the chat. Would you be able to read it out for me?
Adam, shall I read it? for
Yes,
you?
please. Yes, please. Yes, please. Because I can't see it when I'm sharing
Yeah.
the screen.
A place for blind people, post
Okay.
office, a house of blind,
Okay.
yeah, place for blind.
Okay. All right. So I think, except for the post office, I don't know where you got the idea that it is a post office. See, that is the thing. So once you just read it, you would jump to certain conclusions. I can see where the post office is coming from. It's a red roofed house is shining to the skies. So the second question itself gives you the answer to the first question. Identify the imagery used to present blindness in this poem. Now, this should get through to you by this time. So this is something about blindness. Then you can go back and read the poem again very quickly. So this is talking about a place where blind people are in. So now the answer is fine for the first part of the, so let's say you would answer saying this is a place where blind people live, a house for blind people, whatever. Some people would say this is a hospital for blind people. Some people can say this is a sanatorium for blind people, anything. Okay. Now that is half the answer. The other half of the answer is how did you come to that conclusion? So give evidence from the poem. Now, how do we say this is a house for blind people? This is a place where blind people live. A house of color filled with wandering eyes, and all the eyes are blind. That's one example. So you can say this is a place where blind people are in. And the poem or the poet describes this as a house of color filled with wandering eyes. Now, this is a moment where your exposure to poetry or your exposure to language becomes useful, because you realize wandering eyes is like eyes that roam all over the place, but probably not focusing on anything. So if you have noticed about visually impaired people, they don't focus because there is nothing for them to focus. They don't have the vision, so their eyes are always moving. If you look at the eyes very carefully, you see that their eyes are moving all the time. So it's a wandering eye, and all the eyes are blind. So that is example one. Or you can also say, this is a house full of blind people. And this is also a beautiful place because it has a red roof. I suppose red roofs are beautiful. And then here the example, so you can say a red roofed house is how it is described. This is a house for blind people because it says all the eyes are blind. And then to sort of pad up your answer, you can say, the gentle sound of moving fills each room, a sound of hands, dumb hands that touch and pry. So dumb hands again tell you that people are just patting things, people are just touching things. You usually touch and pat things when you can't see properly. So if suddenly there's a power cut, that's when we start touching the walls and touching things to find our way, because our eyes are not focused. Eyes don't get focused enough, or like in that they're not focused that quickly when it goes from light to dark. So that is again another example to support your answer. What kind of place does this poem describe? It describes a place full of blind people. And how do, because the poem says all the eyes are blind, and it also talks about dumb hands that touch and pry. So that will give you the full 3 marks, because that is all that is required. Someone would say that this is a place where soldiers who fought in a war are there. So, but that comes later, or that comes with your exposure or understanding to the world affairs. The second question, identify the imagery used to present blindness in this poem. Rasika, can I have the answers, please? Have people put their answers?
Visual imagery is used here. Red
Okay.
roofed house.
Okay.
Dumb hands that touch and pry.
Okay.
Visual and auditory. Auditory image.
Okay.
Tactile imagery is used. Dumb hand. The same thing repeats, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So again, now read the question carefully. It doesn't ask you to differentiate the imagery. It doesn't ask you to. Ask you to tell or like identify whether it is an auditory image or a visual image or a tactile image or a sensory image. It asks a very simple question. Identify the imagery used to present blindness in this poem. So, in other words, what it is asking you is, what are the images the poet uses to present blindness in this poem? So, the images are these dumb hands that touch, and so the dumb hands, it's an image that is being used to show that these people cannot see, that they're touching things. And also this thing, a house of color filled with wandering eyes. Again, it's an image, no? Wandering eyes is an image to show you that these eyes are not focused. These eyes don't see anything. These eyes don't pay attention to anything particular. So again, it is an image to show that blindness, to highlight the blindness of these people. And then again, if you read a bit further, where lidded eyes can gaze for hours and hours. Lidded eyes are eyes that are shut. So lidded eyes can gaze for hours and hours. So obviously people are sitting there looking at these, or rather facing these beautiful flowers, but obviously not seeing anything. Their eyes are lidded. Lidded eyes again tells you that these people are blind. So again, that is an image. Is it successful? Now, that is the point where you tell the examiner how successful these images are. Now, there you can either say this is successful or not successful. It doesn't matter which stance you take. Like Ms. Dinali was saying before, these are open-ended questions. So you can take a stance, or you can say it is successful to a certain extent, but it is not completely successful, whatever. But here you have to sort of, you have to elaborate why you're saying that. So if you are saying, so I think the images are brilliantly used. I think this is, this poem uses the images, the imagery in a very successful manner. So therefore I would say, yes, it uses these images of dumb hands, the blind eyes, the wandering eyes, and the lidded eyes that gaze for hours and hours. Therefore it highlights, or it brings out the I would say the blindness of the inhabitants of this particular place in a more poignant manner, in a more strong manner. Or someone can say, no, it is not successful because it doesn't really talk about the pain these people are undergoing or whatever. So that's fine. But this is, so the question has two parts. And the first part is basically you look at the poem, you answer the poem. The second part is where your analytical skills, where your deductive skills, where your critical skills are to be used. That is how you get the 5 marks. Third one, how does the poet build contrast between the blind people and seeing person in this poem? Now, that's a very interesting question. And this is also a question which allows you to go back again to the poem and see the different images that are used by the poet to highlight the life or the world of a blind person and a seeing person. Can I give you 2 minutes? Can you quickly type the answer in the chat? Now remember, this is a 4-mark answer. again, you have to elaborate your answer. Rasika, can you please read out the answers as they come
Sure,
in?
ma'am. Sure.
Thank you.
A window gives a scene, but these people are unable to see the particular scene.
Okay.
By drawing his attention to what can be seen, like the red roofed house, flowers.
Okay.
A house filled with colors and wandering eyes.
Okay. All right.
I think others must be typing, ma'am.
Yeah. So I'll start speaking so the others can start typing. But I think all these three, this is 3 people or 4 people? Is it 3?
Yeah, ma'am. One more, shall I read? The
Yes,
difference between color usage in some lines and sound mentioned repetitively in another stanza. Using the contrast of color imagery, the poet draws out the contrast. Also, the sound provides contrast between blind and the seeing.
Okay.
Irony in the lidded eyes can gaze for hours and hours. The poet contrasts the vision and the things both the parties can see.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I let the others to type. I know there's a lag and everything. So one way to
Shashi, there's a sorry, Shash, there's
Yeah.
a repeated question, and I
Yeah.
think it's related to this particular poem. Can we use the same quotation to answer 2 questions? I think they're referring to question 1 and 2 of this. I said if it's relevant, but you might want to elaborate.
Yeah, so that, see, the thing is, you have like, you don't get a book to get different quotations. This is one single poem with which you have to work. So obviously, yes. So the same thing is being used. Use it. You can, if you're quoting, you can use it again and again. If you're paraphrasing, try and change the words that you're using. But if you're quoting directly from the poem, just use it. That is fine. Remember, this is a question, both the unseen prose and the poem. I think Miss Dinali also highlighted this before. This is to test your this is to test your critical ability, your ability to read something new and interpret it. Because what your teachers have been training you for 2 years is not only to memorize Othello or Williams' Glass Menagerie, or I don't know, Tess. This is beyond, this goes beyond that. You are also given a set of skills. The skills are, you read something and you are given, you are trained to interpret it. And when you're interpreting something, you can use the same quotations to support your answer. And so if you're using the same quotation or the same line or the same word to support your answer, that's perfectly fine. Because this question and the unseen prose both test your analytical skills, your ability to read something fresh and analyze, interpret it, and derive meaning, get meaning from what is there without it being taught to you before. So to get back to my question, so I think people have actually highlighted the difference between the seeing person and the blind person by identifying these images that speak of color. The red roofed house, a red roofed house. So only a seeing person will see the color of the roof. And only a seeing person will see the color filled house. Whereas the blind person only would, touch it, or very passively stare at things. So the red roofed house, the reference to a red roofed house, the house of color, these tell you how a seeing person sees this particular place. And Then, in contrast to that, you have the gentle sound of moving, which tells you that these people are moving very slowly, because obviously you can't see. You move very slowly. You touch things, and you are guided by your sense of touch. So that is a contrasting image to or like you can say that that is how the blind person, or the contrast between the blind and the seeing is drawn in that way. The color, the reference to colors, the reference to the red roofed house is to talk about the seeing person, or the perspective of the seeing person, and the reference to this gentle sound of moving, the sound of hands, dumb hands that touch and pry. Actually, those two lines highlight the perspective of a blind person. So there is that contrast drawn. Sound of fingers feeling in a tomb. So again, you are touching things. The blind people touch things. And the other reference to seeing person is 100 windows face long rows of flowers that sway and dance. So obviously that is a seeing person's perspective. You see the windows glistening in the sky, the sun, and you see the long rows of flowers swaying and dancing. And in contrast to that, what you have is lidded eyes that gaze for hours and hours. This passive people, this group of people who probably sit in the sun, but they're just sitting there. They are probably facing the long rows of flowers that sway and dance, but they're not seeing anything because they obviously their vision is compromised. They don't see anything. So they gaze for hours and hours. And obviously there's a contrast. So if you can bring in those two references to how the perspective of a seeing person is highlighted, how the perspective of a blind person is highlighted, then you obviously answer that question well. You provide two examples to support how a seeing person sees things. You provide two examples to show how a blind person is depicted in the poem. You get your 4 marks. And then the next question, explain how repetition adds to the poem's meaning. What does repetition usually do? Can you all type in the chat? How does why do you use repetition in literature?
Ma'am, shall I read the answers?
Yes, please,
Sent
Rafika.
already?
Yes.
The repetition highlights the idea about the blindness described in the poem very well, and it adds more and more sensitivity to our minds about blindness.
Okay.
That is one of the answers.
Okay. Others are still typing, I assume.
Yeah, emphasis is there, emphasize the idea, most have written that.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I think so. You know why repetition is used. So repetition is used to serve that purpose in this poem as well. So repetition adds emphasis to the poem's meaning. Now here, if you just say like repetition adds emphasis, or repetition creates sensitivity towards these blind people, or repetition creates sympathy towards these blind people, you're only getting 1 mark. Or 1.5 marks out of 4, because you're not highlighting, or you're not showing the examiner what exact repetition you mean. So when you answer a question like that, you have to say what is being repeated. So repetition adds to the poem's meaning by making us feel more sympathetic to the blind, by making the meaning more emphasizing the meaning. Yes, what is being repeated to emphasize the plight of these blind people, emphasize the situation these blind people are in. So the repetition of this red roofed house, the visual image of the house is being contrasted with how these people how these people live in this particular house, but they do not necessarily see the color. So repetition of the color of the house, the color of the roof of the house adds meaning to the poem, because when we read that, we realize that this is a beautiful house, but these people living in it are unable to appreciate it or to see it even. And then again, this repetition of the reference to the flowers, long rows of flowers, long rows of flowers, flowers that sway and dance. Again, this repeated reference to this beauty of these flowers, the long rows. So there must have been like a pretty big garden there with lots of flowers. So the flowers are there, but these people who live in this particular house gaze at them with lidded eyes. So obviously they don't see it. So the flowers and their beauty is lost to them. Again, the repetition of the visual image of the flowers adds more emphasis to the plight of these blind people. So you have this very contrasting image where you feel sorry for these blind people for missing out on this beautiful scene outside their windows. And then this again, a gentle sound of moving fills each room, a sound of hands, dumb hands, and sound of fingers. So again, this emphasis on the sound. So because blind people, because they don't have vision, they rely on their other senses to guide them. So they walk around, they move around, listening to things, they touch things, and they identify what is what by the sound that certain things make. And also again, the repeated word, a sound, repeated words like hands emphasize how pitiful or how disadvantaged these people are in this particular house. So when you say yes, emphasis, the repetition adds emphasis to the plight of these blind people. Repetition highlights the plight of these blind people. Repetition evokes sympathy towards the blind people. Then you have to repeat, or you have to tell the examiner, you have to write what words are repeated and what is evoked, what is brought out by these repeated words. That's how you get your 4 marks. Now, I may have spoken for about 2-3 minutes, but that doesn't mean you write one long page to answer that question. You can write all these things in one paragraph. So don't worry about the length as long as you put everything into the answer. And the 5th question, now this has been sort of like a trend for the last 3-4 years. Usually the last question of the Unseen Prose and Poem asks you to give your opinion about the poem or the prose passage. So this is more of a subjective question, because you can say what you feel or what you think in this particular as an answer to this particular question. What mood does the poem evoke in you? So you can say it evokes sympathy in you, it evokes a pity in you, it evokes helplessness against this the plight of these people, because you are seeing how pitiful the existence of these people are. It evokes some kind of a rage within you, because the last line actually talks about the war, blue eyes that shut in France. Don't worry if you don't get that reference, that is fine. If you haven't got that reference, that is perfectly fine. But because we are discussing this is actually a reference to these soldiers who fought in the war. So obviously the First and the Second World War were fought on the continent, and I think this one particularly talks about Dunkirk, if I'm not mistaken. So these soldiers have come back from France, and they were subject to all sorts of atrocities that are part and parcel of war. And they've come, and this is a hospital where these blind soldiers are spending the rest of their lives. So these blue eyes that shut in France, so these soldiers who fought in the war have come back, and they've literally like lost their vision, and their, like, metaphorically also they've lost vision for whatever is left of their lives. So you can say that, it evokes sympathy, it evokes pity in you, it evokes rage in you, whatever. It is fine, whatever you write there, as long as you can support it. So I would say it evokes criticism. This poem makes me critique the war and its impact, because it talks about the blue eyes that shut in France and how these people are moved to being this very passive spectators in this beautiful place, without actually appreciating or seeing any of the beautiful things that surround them, and how they have to move gently through the life because their vision is compromised. I will say all these things if I am arguing for this, but of course it's not you, it's not me. You will be arguing for all these things. And then, so what mood does it evoke in you? So where you tell us the mood, and then to the examiner, you will say, why does it do so? How does it do so? So why does it do so? Why is it evoking sympathy in you? Then you can talk about the helplessness of these people who move around with the sound and with dumb hands that touch and pry. So again, give some evidence to support your answer. And that'll sort of bring you to the 4 marks. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Are there any questions particularly?
There were some questions about, maybe I can, some had sent me
Direct messages, yeah.
Direct messages, like I answered a couple of them, but
Okay, I've got a lot of answers to the questions, but I don't think I have.
yeah, now you're getting answers, actually. I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay, so this is this is a answer. I'm just going to read it out. Someone had said, given this as an answer to the first question, what kind of a place does this poem describe? It's like a working place. People are working busily with machines that their eyes are blind to communicate with each other because of their workload. So even though they have eyes to see, they are like blind. Now, if you are only looking at the first part of the first stanza of the poem, this might be true. But if you read further down, if you read the rest of the poem, you realize you cannot support this argument about people being blind to the beauty around them because they are working with machinery, because there's no reference to machinery in the rest of the poem. So that's why I said, don't jump to conclusions. Read the questions first, and then try to work out the answers to the poem, because sometimes what we do is the moment we see the question, we start answering right away. But see whether what you're saying can be supported throughout the throughout all the questions. So if you're saying this is a place where people are working busily, they don't see the beauty around them, and they're working with machinery, specifically that particular phrase, working with machinery, working with machines, how do you support that? What evidence is there in the poem to support that stance? With machines, how do you know that people are working with machines? And then there's this repetitive line which says all the eyes are blind, the sound of fingers feeling in a tomb before they close and die, lidded eyes can gaze for hours and hours, blue eyes that shut in France. So there's no reference to machines or people working busily, not paying attention to the beauty around them. So if you say something like this in the first question, and then you go back and answer right in the rest of the questions, you will not lose all the marks, but you may have lost marks in the first couple of questions because you are going with a different interpretation, which cannot be supported through reference to the poem. The last question, someone's asking me to explain the last question. The last question asks you, what mood does the poem evoke in you? So what do you feel after you read this poem? What kind of mood do you get? Are you feeling sorry for these people? Are you feeling happy for these people? Are you feeling angry about what has happened to these people? That is the mood. And then you have to say why does it do so? Why does it evoke sympathy in you? Why does it evoke anger in you? Why does it evoke pity in you? So you have to support it by making references to the poem, the stuff that the poem talks about. How, if you're feeling sorry for these people, you have to say that they are moving slowly, they don't appreciate the beauty around them, whatever. So that is the question. Okay, how is this poem connected to war? How blue eyes convey war? You need to know your history fairly well to connect the blue eyes that shut in France to war. That's why I said, don't worry if you don't get that reference. You're not expected to know that, but then if you know your war history, World War history, you will know that a lot of people, a lot of English youth, a lot of young people from England and other colonies of England went to war, and they lost their eyesight and other eyesight and limbs and their lives because of the wars, the First and the Second World Wars. So if you know your history, if you know your war history particularly, you will make the connection. If you don't. That's fine. The world will still continue. What's the reason for the repetition of What's the reason for the repetition of That's a good question. It can denote a particular place, one single place, if you're going grammatically. Or maybe like it is just to say that this is just one of the houses that are scattered around the countryside or wherever, where these blind or people who have been affected by war come to spend the last days of their lives. You can say it creates a gloomy atmosphere, and then you have to say how it creates a gloomy atmosphere. Mood and the tone. Tone is what is indicated by, what is the difference between the mood and the tone, by the way? Mood is what it makes you feel. Tone is how the poem, when you read out the poem, what is suggested by maybe like the use of the words or the arrangement of the rhyme scheme, that is the tone. If you get the first question wrong, and if our answer is somewhat relatable for the rest of the questions, I'm assuming, you will get marks. Yes, you will lose marks for the first question. But then if you get on track with the second and the third question, you get marked for the answer that you write for the second and the third question. If the poem is on war, but if we couldn't find, no, you will not lose marks. That's why I said, like, some people will know it because there are, some people like me who like to read war literature will know what it means. Most people will not. That is fine. All right, I think I've answered most of the questions. I'm just going to share the marking guide for a minute, Dinali, and then it's yours. So this is how the marks are given, allocated. So you can see it's a bit of a mathematical thing. An answer with only one relevant point and no supporting details for the first question, if it is 3 marks, if you don't have supporting details, you only get half a mark. If you have one relevant point supported by reference to the text, one relevant point, you get only 1 mark. Fairly good answer with 1-2 relevant points, but maybe not enough supporting details from the passage or the poem. you get 2 marks. To get the full marks, I'm just talking about the talking about the answer for 3 marks. You have to answer maybe giving 2 points and supporting those 2 points with relevant examples from the passage or the poem. I've just copied it from the passage thing, but it goes for the poem as well. So you can see the marks breakdown. I'll put this in the chat box. You can see the marks breakdown. So this is quite serious. If you don't give evidence to support your answer, you will only, most of the time, you will only end up getting half the mark. Okay, Dinali, it's yours.
Thank you, Shashi. So let me share my screen again. Right, so thanks a lot, Shashi, for doing the poem so comprehensively and answering questions. Some students were sending me questions, and I think I did the wrong thing by answering them on the chat, because I think they should have listened to you discussing the poem. But now I will move on to the reading and answering of the unseen prose passage. And we will, I have shared it in the chat box once more. So if you haven't been able to download it, do it now and start reading it. And I would advise you to first maybe read the first three paragraphs and answer the first question. Okay. So it's these three. This is the right. So this is the first question, and this is the first 3 paragraphs. I know some of you are using phones to read this, so you probably won't be able to see it on this screen, but download it onto any device that you can read it on and read it. I'm going to give you a few minutes, okay? Because I want you to take some time without typing in your chat box one-word answers. And I would like you to answer it. Now this, it doesn't say how much marks it carries, but maybe we will give it 5 marks. No, Shashi. It's discussing the significance.
I would say like 5. Yeah.
5, no? Okay, so let's make it 5 marks. We'll make it 5 marks. Okay, so I'd like you to take at least 5 minutes and do this a bit carefully, and then upload your answers. Maybe you can do it on a piece of paper first and write a good answer in the chat box. You can message me directly. So what I'll do is I'll copy and paste the answer onto the slide so that we will see who sent it. So you can be anonymous if you're shy. Otherwise, and then we can discuss it closely. So now it is, the time is 9:13 according to my clock. I will give you time till 9:18 to do this. You can go offline and come back on, because I think we have enough spaces today. The room is not full today. Thank you. I can see several passes. I've given you now six minutes. Great. Okay, I can see 1, 2, 3, and 4 answers. So what I'm going to do is copy them across onto my PowerPoint, and then we will see it more clearly, I think. And I won't have more than 4 per page, otherwise it won't be readable for you. No? I have shared it multiple times. So if you haven't, don't worry about it now. I hope most of you have got it. Right. I hope you can see the screen. I'll just make it a bit bigger before I go full screen. Right, so now this is 4 students, okay? So this is 1 student's contribution, this is another student's contribution, this is another's, and this is the 4th student. So we'll look at this passage again, okay? So no titles, and I will quickly read this for all of us. I never wept such tears. So the question asks, discuss the significance of the first 3 paragraphs in this passage, okay? So some of you may have read the whole prose passage first, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, and and a few exchanges, conversational exchanges, more than 6 paragraphs, and then concentrated on the first 3 paragraphs as the question asks. Okay, we can do that as well. So I think we have to balance that when we ask you to read the first question and then read the questions and answer and then read the passage looking for answers. I think it's better to read the whole thing before you just focus on the first 3 passages in a question like this, right? Because the rest of the answer will contribute to your understanding. The rest of the passage will contribute to your understanding of these 3 passages. So I will quickly read this, okay? And it's a very relatable situation from what you can see, right? I never wept such joyful tears as I did on the morning my senior Cambridge results were out. I got 8 A's. I was not the only girl either. The entire class got outstanding results, and we all wept such sweet tears. The sisters were so proud of us. They gathered in the hall to congratulate us. Mother Superior smiled at us all, even the 3 gum-chewing girls who hated school and whom Sister St. Vero had recited several additional Hail Marys for, and who had managed to scrape through with 6 C's. They chewed their gum with pride that day. We were all clapping and singing. I began instantly to dream about the book I hoped Bapa would buy me. Bapa didn't like me reading too many books. The Reader's Digest was acceptable. He read that himself regularly, but not books. They gave you headaches. And we can't have you wearing spectacles all your life, can we? He would say. It's bad enough, these nuns allowing you to read Pride and Prejudice books instead of teaching you something useful. But today, with my 8 A's, Bapa might just let me have another book. If by chance he frowned, I would tell him that Middlemarch was written by someone called George. Bapa liked the name George. He had a huge photograph of King George in our shop. As huge as King George himself, Ma always said. I could try telling Bapa that King George wrote Middlemarch. Anything with my 8 A's. We all ran home from school that day, eating raw mangoes and toasted sweet corn and we didn't even realize it was raining. Okay. So the question asks you to discuss the significance of these paragraphs, of this part of the passage. There's a lot going on. No? So we will first look at what you have said. It discusses the narrator's victory, got 8 A's, and her future plan to get permission to read more books from her Bapa, who has a prejudice that education corrupts children. It's bad these nuns are allowing you to read Pride and Prejudice. Okay, very nice start, right? So we read the rest also. Okay, so that's one, I think, one answer. Second one goes, considering the setting of this passage, it is significant to emphasize the place where this incident, which is an academic place, and to understand the characters' emotions and feelings, right? The third answer says, these paragraphs emphasize the importance of a girl being literate in a society, especially in a male-dominated society, which is suggested by addressing like Bapa. Perhaps it belongs to an Asian context. Through the first paragraph, the writer brings out, and I think it ends there, right? This is a passage about a student who reads a lot of books for pleasure, but she or he was avoided of being a reader by one of her relatives called Bapa. Anyhow, she was lucky enough to get good grades in her exam, like most of the children, and they're feasting her triumph. Okay? Right, now you will see the question actually asks you to discuss the significance of what is going on in the passages. And you can see a lot of what you have said here just describes what is going on in the passages. No? So one thing we have to remember is we need to start something like the second one, okay? The passage is significant. You don't have to say it is significant to emphasize. Okay, you either emphasize or you identify the significance. There's a bit of verbosity here, but the approach is right. Okay, and this also, the paragraphs emphasize the importance of a girl being literate in the society, especially in a male-dominated society, which is suggested by addressing like Bapa. Okay, so what do you think Bapa means? Okay, it is an Asian context, so Bapa might mean an elder male relative. No, it could be father, it could be uncle. It doesn't matter if you don't know. Okay. One question asked by a student was, "What do we do if we don't understand a word in a context, in a unseen passage?" What you do is you try to guess the meaning from the context. Okay, because now you can see what Bapa says, what Bapa does, and later on you can see Bapa has a significant influence on her destiny, you know, has a control over her future. So it could be like a guardian, it could be a father, it could be an uncle. Okay, then she talks about her brothers, and you know that Bapa is not a brother. Okay, so Bapa actually means father, but even if you don't know it, you can guess that it is a senior male relative from the context. Okay. So what we have to do here is to talk about how this passage is significant. What does it tell us? So something like the importance of a girl being literate in a society. Okay. So here also we could say, now these could be examples. Bapa has a prejudice that education corrupts children could be an example of certain attitudes held by society towards education. Okay, certain attitudes held by senior people, okay, your elders, who think sometimes it is not worthy to educate children, particularly girls. Okay, right? So I think if you continue this one, the third one, through the first paragraph, the writer brings out, I think that would talk about a significance. That's a good beginning to talk about a significance. Okay. So here, this is this final one is more about what goes on. It's like a summary of the events in the passage, right? So this is not talking about the significance. You're just telling us what happened, and what the passage is about, right? So remember, when we talk about significance, we have to say why, what is important, what is coming out of this. what is the significance or what is the underlying meaning of this? What is the underlying significance of this? Some answers. I don't think you can see these. Yeah, a lot of them I think I can see are about describing what, oh, lots of answers. This is brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So somebody says, ability of religion to bring a roaming mind to a person. Okay, so it's more than a, so the setting is important. I think it's more than a religion, it's an educational institution run by the Catholic Church, no? Because there is, even if you don't know much about Catholicism, you can see that it is about religion. No? So the sisters who are in a convent, sisters are the teachers and the principals. Mother Superior would be the principal, the headmistress, and reciting Hail Marys would be prayers. No? So if it's a Buddhist context, we will say we conducted a Bodhi Puja. If it's a Muslim context, we could say we prayed. If it's another Christian context, you could also say we prayed, right? But here, additional Hail Marys definitely conjures or creates a Catholic context. But even if you don't know that this describes a Catholic convent, it doesn't matter. You guess that it's a school and there is some element of joy about education. Okay. So what is the significance? Now I can see a lot of answers. As I said, that is talking about what goes on. Okay. Here I can see a nice one here. The first three paragraphs denote the importance of education in the lives of young girls who strive to learn. Okay, I'm going to cut that and have it. Okay, Fatima, that's an excellent. That looks like a very promising answer. So I'm going to have it separately. Let's look at it closely. I'll make it bigger. Right? So let's look at it closely. The first two paragraphs denote the importance of education in the lives of young girls who strive to learn. Strive to learn and love to learn, I suppose. No, very good. These paragraphs suggest a ladies' missionary school, a missionary school for girls, you could say, okay? Which would have been a place that provided education to young girls as it was run by nuns. The children here strive to learn more, which signifies wisdom. I began instantly to dream about the book I hoped Bapa would buy me. It is suggestive, okay? Don't say it is suggestive because suggestive has another meaning. It suggests is more than enough, okay? Suggestive means crude, okay? Don't make suggestive comments means you don't make crude comments, don't make vulgar comments, okay? So use the word suggestive minimally. It suggests that the society described here is a patriarchal society as the girl tries to bribe her father to get the book that she wants. If by chance he frowned, I would tell him that Middlemarch was written by someone called George. Okay, hence it suggests that young girls in society thrived and had interest in learning. This is very good. Okay, I would say that you could go on to other points. Okay, so you have talked about girls striving to learn, who are interested in learning, and that the society suggests, the society suggested by the girl's older relative is a patriarchal society, is a male-dominated society, okay? And maybe it is not the best example to say as the girl tries to bribe her father. It's more to do with what the father said about, not learning anything useful. It's also his attitude towards education seems to be more negative. No? She's delighted that she has got 8 days. Her teachers, her educationists are delighted, but he tends to think, oh, what is the point of studying books? They're useless. No? When he says, it's bad enough these nuns are allowing you to read Pride and Prejudice instead of teaching you something useful. Okay, so he contrasts reading with useful things. In other words, reading classic works like Jane Austen is useless. Okay, Yeah, so you have given examples. Maybe you could find better examples, but for the given 5 minutes, this is a very good answer, I would say, right? So what other things can we say about this passage? Okay, if we come back to it. Let me see what else you have said. Okay. Yes, this girl is raised in a society where there is male domination. Yes. The first 3 paragraphs of this passage depicts the speaker's happiness. Okay. It also portrays the attitude of the speaker's society towards education when it said it's bad enough these nuns. Okay. Don't quote half, right? If you're quoting, don't quote like the first bit and put ... It's better to quote the most important part, right? Hence, it presents the happiness of the narrator, which is eventually transformed into that of a mere frustration when Bapa tries to stop her from learning. Now, this answer is quite good, Emma, but I think you're going beyond what is asked in the question, because the first question asks you about the first 3 paragraphs, okay? So if we look at this answer, let me just pick it up for you. So if you look at this answer, the first 3 paragraphs of this, let me make it bigger. The first 3 paragraphs of this passage depict the speaker's happiness. For instance, I never wept, we didn't even realize, okay? Now, these examples are wrong, okay? We didn't realize and I never wept don't depict happiness. No, there are lots of words and phrases that depict happiness, but this is not the significance of the passage. No, you need to say why she's happy and what is the significance of this happiness. Okay, wept such sweet tears would be a depiction of happiness, right? The sisters were so proud of us. Okay, Mother Superior smiled at us. All those so wept joyful tears, such sweet tears would be how the speaker's happiness is depicted, right? Moreover, it portrays, now this is where you talk about significance. It portrays the attitude of the speaker's society towards education when it is said, it's bad enough those nuns and the rest of the court, please, okay? Because this doesn't convey anything, right? Hence, it presents the happiness of the narrator, which was eventually transformed into that of a mere frustration when Bapa tries to stop her from learning. Now, this part, it presents the happiness of the narrator is relevant. This part is not relevant, from which onwards, because that you're talking about what happens after the 3 paragraphs. So make sure you answer to the point. Basically, it asks you about the significance of the 3 paragraphs. Don't refer so directly to the rest of the paragraphs. Okay. Because that's not, this is what is irrelevant now. Okay, so from here, it is irrelevant. Right, so some of the other things we can say about the significance of this paragraph are things like, we can see the nuns being happy, we can see the children being happy. The nuns, in the first paragraph, we can see the nuns have prayed for the uninterested girls, the gum-chewing girls, okay, that's just the playful girls, the naughty, mischievous girls who don't study. And they are shown in contrast to the good girls who study and got A's. The nuns prayed for them, so everybody managed to pass. Even the gum-chewing girls had felt pride that day because they were all happy. Okay, we were all clapping and singing, another example for happiness, right? So this shows, in contrast to what Bapa behaves. Most of you had focused immediately on Bapa. This shows how we value education, no? How we value not just education, how we value success at examinations, how we value evaluations of education, no? And we feel very proud. See the words showing, it's not just joy, it's pride also, no? They chewed their gum with pride that day. And that is a very nice image, because not the children who do well and get A9 and are put up in banners, even the girls who pass, who manage to scrape through with difficulty, pass with difficulty, feel a sense of pride because they have managed to succeed in this exam. Okay. So see, there are two references to pride. Proud. The sisters were proud, congratulated us, and chewed their gum with pride. Okay. So amongst happiness, there is also a lot of pride. So the significance of that is how much we value, how society generally, especially civilized society, how much we value education, particularly when we achieve high results or when we succeed at competitive examinations. Okay. So this is what we're all feeling now, no? This is what we're all going through. We want to succeed at this exam. And when I say succeed, but I would say succeed is even passing, but you would think of succeed as only getting an A. If you get a B, you haven't succeeded. That seems to be the general attitude now, which is a bad attitude. But here, that success here is for A's and for C's all, right? So don't forget to talk about the significance of that, as well as what Bapa's attitude and Bapa's behavior conveys, no? And here we get before we get to Bapa's attitude, we see how she dreams about a gift, her prize that her dream prize is also a book, okay? And for us, we know that books suggest knowledge. Books symbolize knowledge. Books are symbols of learning and knowledge. No? And she's hoping Bapa would buy me one. And then she directly says, Bapa didn't like me reading too many books. Immediately, we get a slightly negative impression of Bapa, no? And then we realize from what he says that he undervalues education, okay? Then we see, here we can't really go too much into patriarchal society and which makes male relatives control the lives of female relatives too much. Because the details of her marriage, her arranged marriage, which in place of her higher studies is valued in the family, come later. That comes later. No? But then she says, but today with my 80s, Bapa might just let me have another book. So she's also a nerd. No? She loves studying. She wants she loves reading so much that after she has read so much and studied so much, she still wants another book, maybe a lot like many of you, right? If he doesn't like it, okay, now we know that he doesn't like books, she makes this crack, she makes this joke saying, I will tell you Middlemarches was written by someone called George, okay? Now the backstory to this is Middlemarch is written by George Eliot, which is actually the pseudonym or the pen name for a woman, okay? Because it was written in a time when women found it very hard to publish, right? You don't need to know all that, but the fact that she's going to use the man's name, saying it was written by a man, okay, like you, so we can, you can buy it from me, it's okay, right? And then it goes on to say, as huge as King George himself, and that kind of creates, suggests something about the setting, the time this passage was set. So there are two clues in this passage to tell us that it's set in the past. It's pretty much set in the past because it refers to King George. Okay. Now remember Queen Elizabeth, who's now the Queen of England, was reigning from 1947 or something. Okay. King George was her father, or maybe even her grandfather, we don't know, right? So this is a story that was written, set about 80 years ago at least. Another clue is the exam. Senior Cambridge was the exam during colonial times. Okay, it was a British exam in place of A-levels also, right? But later on, you will realize that this is not even set in Sri Lanka, no? So, but in an Asian country, right? Anything with my A-levels. Okay, so now in the last paragraph, we see. So here it's about very positive attitudes towards education and success in examination. Here it is, he undermines education. And here we see the clash. No? The clash is played out with the daughter's imagined fight with the father when she thinks of very crafty ways of getting him to buy a book that she wants, okay? But then the last two lines go back to the happiness of the first paragraph. No, we ran all the way, we all ran home from school that day, eating raw mangoes and toasted sweet corn, and we didn't even realize it was raining. They were so happy, they didn't even notice the slight discomfort of getting wet in the rain, right? So the significance of the three passages, as I said, could be, as you started by saying how conservative society, traditional society, male-dominated society might undervalue education, especially among girls. But at the same time, education is valued within the school. Okay, schools were set up for women, right? This is an indication of how much education is valued, okay, and how much success in education in examinations is valued, and how this can clash with each other. There's a conflict here, and the conflict takes place in a very in the home. No, we see it described in the home, but this can be a clash of attitudes, ideologies that we find in society in general. No, Shashi, anything you'd like to add to this?
No, actually, no. I was thinking like what I basically have to reiterate what you were saying. So if they are going to talk about the significance, they can't just jump into conclusions like patriarchy and everything, which comes in the later paragraphs, no? The significance of the first three paragraphs is what needs to be highlighted, I would say. Or am I? Dinali?
Yes, thank you. Thanks. I was looking for my mic button underneath all the comments. Okay, so basically, I think you have attempted it very well. Answer these questions, just get a idea of the question, and then look at idea of what is going on. Then look at why is important. So you have to kind of work backwards, okay? When you write about significance and what is suggested in these lines, what is suggested by this word, see what it means, see what it says, see what it does first, and then analyze it before you start writing, right? So what happens is you start writing, and then somewhere in the middle of one paragraph, there might be something that is really relevant and really good. That is where the analysis is. But a very good answer will start with the analysis and then give the example. Okay, so if you write this, like if you're going to discuss the significance of these paragraphs, you say it is significant because it discusses two different attitudes towards education. Okay, the first paragraph talks about the joy of educational achievement, and the next paragraph talks about, you don't even have to refer to paragraphs, but the character of Bapa highlights how education can be undermined or devalued or not taken very seriously in conservative society. Okay, and then these two different ideologies or attitudes can often be at loggerheads with each other, can clash, can create a clash. Okay.
And there was this
other things you might want to say is, okay.
Sorry, someone I think mistakenly sent it to me. Should we write about the first person narration?
If it's relevant, yeah. If it's relevant, I think in the question 3, which asks you to comment on Bapa's character, you can say that Bapa's character is brought out by the very personal description by the writer, by the narrators, and the narrator's description is made personal also by the first person narrative. No, it's a very personal kind of. We see the event through. We see the events unfold from the narrator's point of view, no? And she uses the first person. Okay, any more questions? If you have any questions. Was it clear? This also could be a struggle between generations. Okay, it also could be a clash of two generations, one generation with that grew up, perhaps Bapa is more conservative. He has more, conservative attitudes towards women's education because that was the world that he lived in. Okay, in his time, women were not going to school. Women were not being included in education, but things may have changed. And now there are schools that educate girls, schools that expose students to learning, and schools are identifying, obviously, it's giving opportunities for very bright girls to do well. This is obviously a very smart young woman, right? I don't think we can ask questions when you raise the hand. So Ijaz, please type your question. It will be better if you type your question. Right? So it's generational. It could be generational as well, and two generations can suggest two different times in history, in how society has evolved. We know that in the early part of the 20th century, from like early 20th century to mid 20th century, education for women really progressed, particularly in more conservative parts of our society. Okay, so at the beginning of the century, like 1920s, like 1 or 2 women went to university. By 1960s, 50% was women in university. So we have seen in the 20th century huge progress, huge changes, transitions in society that can make the views of the two generations seem very different. Okay, so you can bring in the generation gap as well. Okay, it's also about the significance. It's about how education is joyful in a way. Okay, because she's studying Pride and Prejudice, but she wants to read Middlemarch. Education is also something that is, so she's not studying science, which maybe she doesn't like, but she's also studying what she likes. Okay, so personal choices in education, how education can address your interests. I'm not saying it very nicely, but I think you can get what I mean. Education is also about enjoying what you're learning. Okay, because just because the exam stopped, she hasn't stopped reading. No, she wants another book to read. And Middlemarch is much harder and much bigger and more complex than Pride and Prejudice. That's why you don't have it for your A-levels. Right? Any other questions? Can we say that it's based on a colonized era because of the references of convent education and the Reader's Digest? Not really, because Reader's Digest is still existing, so is convent education, right? Yes, we can bring out the feminism and the generation, the older generation, attitudes of an older generation, more conservative older generation, I would say, through Bapa. Okay. We can also look at it as adults not being able to understand kids. That's what I talked about, the generation gap, right? It could be that Bapa is not really aware of his young daughter or his young niece growing up and having her own interests, her own opinions. Okay. Very good. Very good. I'm going to use this schema, lovely, for the ideas. Okay, you haven't written a kind of a structured answer for this, but I will share this because I really like the ideas you're sharing in it. Okay, I can see your thinking is very, some of your thinking is very good, very precise and sophisticated, which is nice to see. The people speak is really happy about her A-level results, but the real happiness is gaining the book she wants from Bapa. Okay, so that is how it's conveyed to you. That's interesting. In another view, we can say that maybe the speaker has gained such good results just to gain one book, reading book from Bapa. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. So that's where you're reading in too much. Okay, so I will mark that in maybe, I can't find my, no, I let it alone. This shows how far girls have to go to gain education when they are dominant characters. Now, I like that very much. It's an effort. No? So, girls who have achieved success in education from conservative families that don't believe in education have to fight harder, have to struggle more, right? And this happens even today. No? Even in our country, I think it happens. I think this story is set in an African country. Bapa Satterans explains the lack of knowledge on the importance of education that the patriarchal society has. Very good. Okay. So that is where now this is the significance. I'm going to put it in red. How far girls have to gain to. Okay. So this is where I talk about significance, the importance of education, that the lack of knowledge on the importance of education. Okay. The lack of awareness of the importance of education in patriarchal society. Okay, it's more than knowledge.
Consideration, no?
Lack of consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, even. Then it should have 2 words. Lack of awareness of or the consideration towards the importance of education in patriarchal society. Okay, so you can make your writing more concise as well. In patriarchal society, right? I'm just correcting, making your expression a little bit more tight. Okay. How far girls have to go to gain an education, the struggle girls face, okay, the extent of the struggle that girls have to face to gain an education when there are more than dominating characters, when there are conservative elders, okay, elders who don't believe in education and all that. Okay, so a lot of promise. What I can see is that you need practice to write. Okay, you have the ideas, you have the language, but you need to practice to structure answer so that you address the question. Write about the significance and then give the examples, right? Okay, I like this as well. I'm going to share this as well. I will share this as well in a minute. The emphasis on the fact that she was not the only girl in the class who passed well, and their happiness shows their love for education and the role it plays in the lives of these girls. Yeah, it has played a significant role in the lives of these girls as well as in the educators' lives. Huh? The next paragraph, however, shows a contrast between Bapa's insight into the idea books, and the girls' dream of, I'm not sure of this, girls' dream of acquiring a certain book. Okay, so there is a contrast, but maybe you can say this a bit more clearly, right? But I like the way these sentences are structured. Right, so this is how you can address the question. Right, I think we have gone on enough. Do attempt the rest of the questions on your own, and maybe you can do it with your teachers. And so that's our discussion. And if you have any other questions, do we have time for questions? Maybe we'll have about 10 minutes for any kind of questions. No, Shashi?
Yeah, 10 should be fine, no?
Fine, yeah. Let's see if there are any other questions on the chat. Chanutya asked, Madam, can we say that the description about Bapa prepares us for something bad in the later paragraph because it contrasts with her love for education and Bapa's attitude? Very good point, because here you're pretending you haven't read what is going to happen. though you have, but it is good. It's like it's a foreboding. No? It's very light. It doesn't come across very seriously, but it actually prepares us for something a bit negative. In fact, I got that feeling when I read the Bapa's reaction. I thought, oh no, this girl's A's are going to be of no use with a Bapa like this, right? Yeah, what's the meaning of Baba? We discussed this at length, Stephanie. Baba, you don't need to know what Bapa is. It's not Baba, it's Bapa. It could be, from the context of the passage, we know it's an elder male relative, okay? It could be a dad. Okay, Harley says the attitude towards education is negative. The narrator, girls Bapa, does have a positive attitude towards education, and it shows that the men in this society do not like suggest. It doesn't show because we only know Bapa. There could be other men who encourage her, right? It suggests, okay? It indicates, kind of tells us, right? That the men in this society do not like women becoming literate. It's more than literate, educated, okay? Study, you want to study and let this match slip. Now there you're not answering the question because that quote is from after the 3 paragraphs, right?
Can I butt in here for a minute?
Yes.
Yes. So in that question, in that answer, she talks about men in general. And this is something that you see in unseen prose and poetry both, especially for the 5th question. When you are asked to comment on the poet's attitude or the prose writer's attitude or the mood or whatever, you can bring in your ideas, but don't generalize. Because I think last year's unseen poem, it was about death, and a lot of candidates tried to justify and sort of go on a different track altogether by trying to read the poem through their respective religious lenses, which might, I'm not saying it will always, but which might throw you off the track.
Yes, I think I agree with you. In fact, there was a direct question asked me about the poem, about something that could be seen an interpretation of the setting, which had no connection to what was going on in the poem. So something that students do sometimes is to imagine things in the poem. Okay, there are things that you like to write about, and you try to kind of introduce it into your analysis. That's why we keep batting on about. We need to see the evidence. Okay, so for example, I'll give you a very classic example. Whenever there's a flower, you talk about romantic poetry, nature, the value of nature, the purity of nature. Sometimes a flower in that poem might be nothing to do with the romantic ideals of nature, right? But because we know about romantic ideals of nature, what nature means to the romantics, we tend to impose that idea on everything we see, okay? So we be very careful about that. So when you read something, you have to kind of leave that aside and read it with an open mind, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is a characteristic of it's a characteristic of inexperienced analysis. Okay, yeah. So that's why we keep. I mean, I said earlier also, you need to do many of unseen poems and unseen passages and get the hang of how to do it. Right. 1 hour, 2 hours of a seminar is not enough. This is a lot of work on your part with your teachers. Okay.
And just to reiterate, I mean, sort of to add to what Dinali was saying, unseen poetry and prose shouldn't be the place where you voice your individual opinions about society, disparity, social class, and all these things. The essay is the place where you voice these things, or the solid lit paper is where you bring in your own individual opinions about certain beliefs and whatnot with reference to the text. But I think if you're trying to experiment a little bit with the unseen prose and poetry, that might work against you. I'm not saying it will, it might.
It might, because if there's no evidence in the text, in the passage, and you haven't identified the evidence. Okay, remember, the examiners are not going to look for evidence for you. You have to provide the evidence. Okay, sometimes you might think that you're stating the obvious, but you have to say, okay, I feel this because of this. This line suggests the significance is this. Okay, and it's also better to start with the significance and then show the example.
Yeah. And there is one question, I think this has been there day before yesterday also, about how to improve language within, I mean, before the exam. So the only advice I can give you is read good writing. So you have access to internet, you have access to books online. I mean, not just fan fiction, but other kind of, decent material. Read The Guardian, read the New York Times, read. That is the only way to improve your language. There is no other shortcut. I'm sorry.
And also read with awareness. Right now, I mean, ideally, reading should have started long time ago, years ago, and you should have been like a very widely read student in an ideal world. Like widely read 17-year-old or 18-year-old now that you are in an ideal world. But now, since you don't have much time, look for good articles, well-written articles. Ask your teachers, ask somebody else, people whose language you admire, and read them with awareness. When you read, don't just read it for fun as well, but then see what they do with language, see what the words mean, right? One problem with the internet is there is a flood of information, but not enough good language. We get a lot, even like the news items on the online version of newspapers, you see are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, 2 lines, 3 lines, and sometimes they are not very well edited because they are on a kind of a non-stop updating frenzy. Every 24 hours they update the news, give new news, breaking news, all that. But if you look at a longer text written in, say, maybe international newspapers like Dr. Shashi suggested, New York Times, The Guardian, the Guardian in England, Times of India has good features. Even the Sunday Times here has very good features. Writers like Namini Vijayadasa, they write very, very well, right? So when you read those, read with interest and also look at how they use language, okay? What kind of words are they using, okay? This might challenge you to change some of the very recurrent wrong usages that may have got into your system, okay? So always be aware that some of the usages might be wrong, and get feedback from your teachers, get feedback from others, get feedback from your senior akkas and ayyas who have graduated, who have finished their levels, and you admire their language skills. It doesn't always have to be a teacher, okay? So when you read, also read with awareness. And also another thing you have to do if you want to write well is to write. Just reading is never enough. Reading will improve your awareness of grammar structures, your vocabulary style, your awareness of it, but you won't develop your writing if you don't write. So if you don't have time now, you're very busy with 3 subjects, write at least a paragraph every day, okay? You can't write an essay a day, but at least write 1 paragraph of an essay, 1 paragraph of a long answer, okay? Right, now I think we'll quickly talk about, yes, can we have websites of really good articles? All those newspapers we suggested have are online, okay? So New York Times, you have to subscribe to it free for a brief time. The Guardian,
actually get it free then. Like, I think you can get certain segments free forever.
You can get it free. Yeah, it's free forever. Wow.
Yeah, so certain things you can't get everything, but you have to choose. So if you choose the features or like world politics, that's good enough.
Right. Then Himal South Asian has that's a bit advanced, but
that is a bit
very advanced.
Yeah. There is a question. I'm just going to answer that question. Sometimes
Okay.
students use poems other than that is on the syllabus to support their answer. Is it okay? The thing is this: if you are using, let's say you are writing an answer on nature poetry, you have Wordsworth and Blake on the syllabus, and you are maybe using Keats and Yeats to support your answer. That is fine, but then you can't use someone totally irrelevant to support the answer. And don't think that just because you use things that are beyond your syllabus, you're going to gain extra marks if it is not going to support your answer. Sorry, Dinali, sorry.
No, I agree. I'm looking at the questions also. There is a nice question, which is very sweet. Madam, could you please explain this line briefly, especially the significance? Where will I find a professor for a girl who has studied? Okay, now this is a bit sarcastic what the what Bapa is saying. You see the, I don't think it's found in the first three paragraphs, but it's important for his character. For the third question, he's talking about a marriage partner for the protagonist, for the narrator. And he says, okay, now you have studied, so I will have to find someone who has studied equally. Okay, so his idea of marriage is to find two people who are matching in. If she's educated, the only person who will accept her for marriage is a professor. Okay, so this has layers of meaning actually. We must think more about this. It could be he's being sarcastic and he's teasing her, because the idea of a professor for a young girl is an old man with glasses and white hair and a white beard, a bit like me without the beard. But so he may be mocking her, saying, okay, if you have studied, you can't find a marriage partner. Okay, so there is that. Okay, they're putting her down, saying you are unmarriageable if you study well. Okay, marriage and education, marriage and education for women. That there's some tension in that. No, so traditional societies think if you're too educated, you're not suitable for marriage. You won't make a good wife. And the underlying meaning there is, if you're educated, you can't be a good wife. Uneducated people make better wives because they will be more submissive. Lots of things going on in this line. Okay, but here on the surface of it, he's cracking a joke in a way. He's not being, I don't think he's being too serious, but it has a very serious undertone. Good question. Okay, I don't know whether I over-explained it, but there could be several significances in this as part of his, his character. Right? Shall we stop now, Shashi? Or is there more? Are there more questions?
Up, no? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about master guide books, my dear. I haven't read those. I know they exist for O levels. I don't know about A levels. But a lot of, I will caution you about model essays, model answers, because they don't develop your skills. You might get an idea of what a good answer looks like, but some of those are not good answers. Qualities cannot be assured in all of them, right? But it doesn't help you. Sometimes it can actually demoralize you. You might think, oh, I can never write like this, right?
And there's one last question. I think we have talked about this. Can we interpret paragraphs and poems in our own way, which might be highly different from the actual meaning? I mean, if it is against the actual meaning, how are you going to provide evidence to support your reading is going to be my question.
Exactly.
If you don't provide evidence, you're not getting marks. And a word of caution, do all your experiments when you're preparing for the exam, not at the actual exam.
Yeah. Also, there's a question, are there any books available to practice unseen poems and prose passages? We actually have a few unseen prose passages that actually Ms. Vaide shared with us. Do the ones in the past papers, all of them, it doesn't matter even if it's the old syllabus, because unseen prose and poetry occurs in all the old syllabuses. And maybe as an activity, you can write their own questions. Get a few of you get together and think of how you can write questions for these answers and then answer them, right?
And also like websites like the Poem Hunter, or like these poetry, where you find these,
Yeah,
well-known poets and their work coming up. Read it and try to understand it.
exactly.
That's the only way. That is, I think, the thing is, a lot of people are asking about shortcuts. I don't think shortcuts exist.
Yes, I think we have got into a culture of shortcuts and tricks for exams, and which is not helping our students, not helping you, my dear students. So some things, remember, it's easier not to remember shortcuts, but to do it the traditional way, where you do a bit of work, hard work at the beginning, and then at the end, towards the by the time the exam comes, you won't need shortcuts. Okay. I think we have got into this culture of, tricks and
Quick
strategies and quick fixes for how to face exams. And poor students don't know when to use them and when they should not, they should avoid using them. And then you lose answers, marks that you would have got if you weren't trying the tricks, right? Okay, I think we can call it a day now. It's quite late for everyone, and people have been dropping out also, fair enough. And shall we hand over to
Rasika.
Okay, let me make a brief farewell speech. So thank you very much for all of you who have joined us for the 3 days and been very actively engaged. You're most welcome. Lots of thanks and blessings. Same to you. So we would like to wish you all the very best. Study hard, work productively, right? Rather than thinking of shortcuts, do solid work for the exam. And we hope to see you in our university, some of you at least, and do all.
Yeah, and when you come, please identify yourself.
It happens without too much. Of course, yes. And stay safe and stay well during these uncertain times, because COVID is still a threat, maybe a bigger threat than when we were more scared of it. We are less scared of it, but the threat is bigger. And all the very best, students.
Yeah, good luck with the exams and good night.
Thank you very much, dear madams. It was really your guidance, and they cleared a lot of doubts the students had. Even teachers were given good guidance. Mithila, do you have to say anything? I'd like to give you the chance also.
Yeah, thank you, Rasika. And we always, I know that we are always, feeling very grateful, especially to this very kind and generous staff of University of Kelaniya, especially always every year, Ma'am Dinali Fernando and her team is always coming to Kurunegala to help the students of Northwestern Province. So we really appreciate this very generous and philanthropic service that you are rendering to us. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am Dinali Fernando and Dr. Sashikala. And also I would like to thank our friend Ms. Vaidehi, although she's not here, for taking all your precious time for us to help our students to face the exam. So thank you so much. And I offer my, salute to you all. Thanks a lot. And Rasika, thank you so much for taking initiatives to arrange it this time in this way. And thank you so much for your support as well. And students, I wish you all the best.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And thank you, Mithila. And I kindly request all of you to complete the feedback form. That will be helpful for us. And yes, I must express my sincere gratitude to dear Madam Tinal Fernando and dear Madam Shashikala Salla, also Mrs. Vaidehi, for devoting the precious time for 3 days and giving superb guidance, clearing all the doubts and discussing paper 1, 2, and unseen poetry, all the stuff where students are benefited at large. And I think it is the one and only workshop done during pandemic for GZ A-level English students. Thank you very much, dear Madam, for the meritorious service done. We are much obliged to you as Chiaw Zon, Ras Chiaw, and Mr. Isru Jayasundara, Deputy Director of Education. Chiaw Zon extends his sincere thanks to you. And also, I must remind Madam Himadri Jayasinghe, who helped us to share the link throughout. And also, thanks a lot, Mithila, for helping me in every way and sharing the link as well. So, as ma'am says, let's make it, call it a day. And thank you, everyone. Stay safe during pandemic. Study hard, dear students. And as Madam Dinali and Dr. Shashi suggested, you have to work hard and read in depth and write comprehensively to practice more to gain the best results. And good luck, everyone. Good night and stay safe. We'll meet once again if time permits us. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone, and good night. And thank you, Rasika and Mr. Isuru and Mithila, for all your committed work for the students.
Thanks a lot, Madam. Great pleasure to have you.